And we are rolling. What is going on, ladies and gents? Welcome back to another episode of the Student Podcast. So this is episode 2. First thing I'd like to dive into, or the first thing I'd like to say, is a huge thank you for the support on the first episode. Honestly, mind-blowing. I've got over almost 700 listens as of today, which is unbelievable. I believe 600 on YouTube, and then we've got 100 on SoundCloud, Spotify, and iTunes. So if you didn't know that, I actually managed to get the audio version up on SoundCloud, Spotify, and iTunes. It took me a few days to get it up on the iTunes, just because I think it takes them some time to review the podcast. Obviously, I'm new to this podcast space. I literally threw myself into the deep end. And yeah, things are going well. I appreciate all you guys' support. And so I thought I'd come back and do another one fairly soon after the first one went up. I'm currently sat here, obviously wearing my Mercedes top. If you guys didn't know, I am actually a bit of a Formula 1 fan, and I do support the boy Lewis Hamilton. Me and David went to the Austrian Grand Prix back in July maybe, and that is live on my YouTube channel. Honestly, I'm just going to constantly plug my YouTube channel on this podcast. Anyway, I'm sat here with my coffee. Yesterday was my first day back at university. So you're probably thinking, Tom, why are you sat in your kitchen back at home then if you're back at university? Basically, I went back to uni on Wednesday. I moved all my stuff back into the house. So obviously met up with all the boys. Met up with Jacob, Andreas. Obviously lovely seeing them. Haven't seen them in literally like 3 months. So moved all my stuff in, went to my induction day at university yesterday, which I'll dive more into. And then this morning I had a doctor's appointment, so I had to drive back last night to be here for the morning. And then I'm going to go back to uni probably tomorrow afternoon because I want to see the family. Tonight I'm going to go out for a few drinks with some of my mates. Tomorrow I'm going to see my granddad, etc. You got to see your family when you're back at home. Make the most of being at home, because obviously when you're at uni, you tend not to be at home often, especially if you live in, I don't know, a bit further away from university. So luckily for me, I'm literally like a 55-minute drive away from uni, so I can pop back whenever I want. And also I've got access to my car, which is fantastic. So yesterday was my first day back at uni. I'll actually talk about, in fact, what we'll do, we'll start off the podcast diving into a story time. And this is my first evening at university in my new house. So if you guys have been keeping up with the YouTube videos, you know that I've just moved into my third year house. So I'm now technically a third year student, which is absolutely unbelievable. I can't believe how fast the whole uni experience has gone. You people that are probably going into Freshers Week now, you're probably thinking that your third year is absolutely years away. Well, technically it is years away, but you'll probably think it's absolutely ages away. But honestly, it's absolutely flown. So honestly, make the most of your Freshers Week. Make the most of your first few years at university when you can kind of chill out a little bit more. Definitely prepare yourself for third year when things are going to get a little bit hectic, but it will come around quick. So make the most of your first few years. You guys are probably quite stressed out at the moment. You're probably quite worried. You're probably quite anxious about meeting new people, about starting your course. But just try and enjoy it as much as possible, because at the end of the day, you're not going to be at uni for very long. It is a very small portion of your life, and you're not going to be able to do it again. You're not going to be able to do a degree again unless you do a different degree, obviously. So just make the most of it. Anyway, talking about making the most of it, our first evening at university was interesting. So Wednesday we moved into the house. Me, Jacob and Andreas were there. Cam was at home at this point. And we all set up our bedrooms and everything. We're all really happy with our rooms. And it got to about 11 o'clock on Wednesday evening. Me and Jacob had uni the following day, so we didn't really want to drink or didn't really want to go out or anything. So we had a pretty chilled evening. And I'm not sure a lot of university people will be doing this. I don't think many students would have probably done what we did on that first night. But this was our version of Freshers Week, obviously taking the mick out of it. But basically what we did, we all got into my bedroom. We're all chilling out in my bed. So I've got a big bed, and then I've got like a beanbag on the floor, and then I've got a TV, and then I've got my laptop, etc. So what we did, we all chilled in my room, me, Andreas and Jacob. Me and Jacob were just lying on the bed, and Andreas was on the beanbags. And I decided to plug my laptop into the TV. So what I normally do is have a lot of my work. When I'm doing work, I'll have my work on my laptop, and then I'll probably put like a film or something on the TV, and I hook YouTube up to the TV, and we actually put like a fireplace on the TV. So I actually have a fireplace in my room, but it's all blocked up and everything. We can't actually use it. So we thought, we'll put a nice fireplace on. Seeing as we're getting into winter, it might be quite a nice little experience having a little fire on. Anyway, plug it on. So we put the TV on. We put the fireplace on the TV. It's 4K fire. I mean, it was pretty sick. I decided to then put some sound effects on it. So we put some crackling fire sound effects on. And then we sat there with piano music on. Us three sat there in silence, listening to this piano music and watching the fire, listening to this fire crackle. And yeah, that was my story time. That is our Freshers Week in a nutshell. Us lads, we do go out, but we don't go out probably as much as a lot of people do. We're not your usual students. We do like to chill out and do stupid and weird things like that by sitting in front of an artificial fire and sit and watch a fire on the TV. But yeah, that was the story time. Not as good as last week's, but anyway, I thought I'd go into that. This moves him into the first day at uni. So Thursday morning, me and Jacob got up. I think I got up quite early to do some editing. And one thing that I really do like about my new room is that first thing in the morning it's quite bright, so I can open my curtains and I've got some nice bright coming into the room, some nice daylight, so I don't actually use any of like my lighting in my room, because I just don't need it because my room is really bright. So I started doing some editing, etc. Had my coffee, got myself ready, tried to look as best as possible. Obviously going into university, thinking that potentially there might be some new students. There's obviously all the freshers. There might be a few new girls on the course, you never know. So we head off into uni. So me and Jacob live in a house probably about a 20-minute drive away from uni. So if we were to walk, it would take quite a long time. So luckily I do have my car with me. And we headed off into university. Got there for about 10 o'clock. We had all our meetings and everything. But however, when we were driving to uni, I'm not going to lie, me and Jacob were saying how unbelievably anxious we were. And this is a bit of a weird situation, because I obviously suffer from anxiety, which I'll dive into in a minute, because that's what I want to kind of talk about on this podcast. But I haven't felt that kind of anxiety in a long time. And me and Jacob were both talking about it, saying we don't understand why we were so anxious going into uni. Obviously, we know everyone on the course. We have been there for the past 2 years. I've driven into university hundreds of times over the past 2 years into the same car park. And for some reason, I was absolutely cacking myself. I was shaking. My heart was racing. I was sweating. I don't know why, but I was proper anxious. And this got me and Jacob talking about how potentially freshers are feeling this week going into university, meeting people for the first time, not knowing what the course is going to be like, not knowing if they're going to enjoy the course, obviously trying to find their way around the uni. They don't know where to go for their lunch, they don't know who to speak to. And me and Jake were talking about how unbelievably anxious it must have been, or it is, for fresher students going into university, not knowing anyone. And there's me and Jacob driving into the car park to get into uni. Both of us are pretty anxious, bit of a state, so weird, like honestly so weird. So I go into uni, my section of the uni is on the top floor, go up the stairs, go into the lift, whatever, go into the room, seeing everyone and everything. Honestly, I was shaking, I was nervous, I was a bit of a mess, I didn't really know what to do with myself. I was that nervous that I kept on needing a wee, so I kept on going to the toilet because I was stressing out. And it was just one of them situations where I just couldn't control how I felt. I couldn't control my anxiety, and I didn't feel comfortable in my surroundings, even though I've been there for the past 2 years. I didn't feel comfortable with the people, but eventually after speaking to everyone again, obviously I was much more comfortable again, because in first and second year, I'd probably say that I was probably one of them confident people, obviously making YouTube videos, doing this podcast, having the ability to speak for a long period of time. I was quite comfortable in first and second year. I was quite one of them confident people on the course. Whenever we did presentations, I was usually okay. I was pretty confident with my work. I was pretty happy with my work. So I was just quite confident in first and second year. But going into third year, I was bricking it. I don't know why, I was just bricking it. It wasn't like we were even having any lessons, it was just an introduction. It was just an induction, like presentation from the head of year. We're meeting our new head of year and teachers and tutors. And it was just unbelievably anxious, just a really anxious experience. Jacob would agree with me on that one. And it did get me questioning how freshers people are feeling, and that's why I kind of want to go into talking about mental health in this podcast and kind of dive into potentially how you could maybe tackle or deal with some of your struggles, whether that's anxiety, whether that's depression. But for me, I'm going to talk through my experiences with anxiety and how I've kind of tackled them. Not necessarily remove them, because you don't necessarily remove them. You're trying to find ways and tricks to kind of just reduce the feeling, to kind of make yourself feel a little bit more calm and just a little bit more settled in your surroundings. So I've got a list here in front of me that I've written down. If I can even speak English then. Written down. I've got a list here that I've written down, which I'm just going to pretty much just read through and give my advice on each point. So obviously, mental health and anxiety, everyone will deal with things differently. But I thought I could just make some use and give some of my points of advice. So the first one being, be active. So for me, obviously you guys know that I'm into the gym. I'm not sure if you've noticed or seen any pictures of me anywhere, but yes, I do go to the gym. I do train a lot. I do spend a lot of time in the gym. I like being active, walking around, eating a fairly healthy diet. Not at the moment, I'm eating quite a lot of food. Especially going into university, you will notice yourself eating a lot of food, because not necessarily eating a lot of food, maybe you're eating a little amount of food, but most of it will be quite bad because you just can't be bothered to cook. Anyway, so my first point is be active, keep doing the things you enjoy to keep your mind occupied. If you're feeling like you're having maybe an anxiety attack or you're feeling quite anxious, maybe go for a 15-minute walk, get some fresh air. And this leads me to breathing. So breathing is essential to just help yourself calm down. So one thing that when I went to the doctors once to speak to them about it, one thing that they advised me to do was actually breathe through my chest. And this is quite a weird concept to get around, like thinking like, how on earth can I breathe through my chest? But what you want to do is you really want to think about your chest when you're breathing. Don't think about your mouth. Don't think about your throat. Try and inhale through your chest and do some really, really deep breaths. Really control your breathing. Think about your breathing. Maybe when you're having an anxiety attack and you're quite panicking, obviously your heart rate's going, you're breathing quite fast, you kind of gasp some air, you're feeling quite faint, etc. Try and slow yourself down. Think about your breathing. Try and breathe through your chest. I still struggle to this day to breathe through my chest. It's quite hard one to explain. But 100% focus on your breathing. Obviously your breathing is key. A lot of the time, if your heart is heart racing, or maybe even if you're doing sport and you're feeling like you're absolutely blowing, the main thing you do, or the main thing you go to, is to sit down, relax, chill out a little bit, and focus on your breathing to really calm yourself down. So this is really effective for any aspects in life. But for me, focus on your breathing is key for calming myself down. If I am having like a bit of a situation, or I'm having a bit of an anxiety attack. And yeah, the next point being, question your thought pattern. So ask yourself why you feel the way you do, and question if they are true. So this is something, so recently I'm not going to go into too much detail because I don't really want to speak about it, but recently I've been suffering from something, or I've been very anxious about something. And naturally, when you start to feel quite anxious about something, you think of the worst case scenario. You think of the worst, just the worst case scenario. The thought pattern is silly. I mean, when you think back at it, what you actually go through in your mind, a lot of the things are just silly, what you think about. So one thing that I do is just ask myself, why are you thinking like this? Why are you thinking this way? Why are you questioning this? You know what I mean? You gotta question if the things that you are thinking about are true, and if that is even going to happen, because a lot of the time them things aren't going to happen. So for me, I'll try and think of an example here. For me, when I present at university, I remember one time I was presenting we basically did a 2-week work experience, and we had to present our experience in front of our year and the first year. So we're in this lecture theatre. I've never ever presented in a lecture theatre before. Obviously, as you can imagine, standing in front of like 100 people is scary, especially in a lecture theatre where you're at the bottom and all these people are in these chairs up above you. You've got a microphone. Anyway, I was unbelievably anxious about this. This is probably more kind of nervousness, maybe not so much anxiety, but you guys will probably have a lot of presentations in your time at university. So this is probably a good piece of advice. But what I was thinking for this whole time, I was thinking, like, what if I say things wrong? What if I like pass out on stage? What if I kind of stop and I stutter and I just make an absolute fool of myself? And what I tend to ask myself is, at the end of the day, why does it matter? These people are not going to sit there, they're not going to be lying there in their beds in the evening thinking about that presentation I've done, whether I've stuttered once, whether I've maybe said a word wrong, or I've missaid something, or I've missed something out. These people do not care. They generally do not care. A lot of the time when you're doing a presentation, a lot of people aren't even watching you. So there is no stress about it, and these are kind of the things that I go through my head. I tell myself, it doesn't matter. If you do mess up, it is fine. And therefore, I try and reduce the pressure on myself, because I'm very, very hard on myself. I want to be the best I possibly can be. I want everything to be perfect. If I am doing something, I want to give it 100% and make sure that I'm going to do it to my 100%. And presenting is one of them situations where you don't want to mess up. You don't want to be that guy that stutters. You don't want to be that person that is going to mess up your presentation and essentially not even ruin your degree. Because with me, we don't get marked on our presentation. We get marked on the actual work that we put on the wall. So even if we mess up whatever we're saying, we're getting marked on the work on the wall. So whatever I say in the presentation doesn't actually matter. So therefore, I was in this presentation. I knew where I was on the list. Obviously, the more people that have gone up and passed, everyone's doing fine. You're thinking, oh my God, I'm going to be that person that's going to mess up. And you think of the worst case scenario. A lot of the time I'm thinking that I'm going to pass out or something, because when you're quite nervous, you do like stress out a lot. You do feel quite anxious. You feel quite shaky. A lot of the time I'm sweating. I need a wee. I'm really nervous. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter. Question your thought pattern. Ask yourself why you feel the way you do, and just question if they are true. Just question why you are thinking a certain way. And once you kind of think through the thought process, and actually give yourself some time to think about the way you are feeling, the way you are feeling, you will generally feel much more calm. And you'll be able to tackle the situation much, much better, rather than just going into it thinking worst case scenario, thinking the worst thing that could possibly happen. It's not going to do you any favours, but naturally, as someone that suffers, you do think of the worst case scenario. The next thing is a pretty simple point, and that's going to be just to remove yourself from the situation. So this can work and this cannot work. So for some things in life, I would suggest you not to remove yourself from the situation, because you're probably not going to gain anything out of removing yourself from the situation. So maybe if you're feeling very anxious in, say, a lecture or in a class, I would suggest to maybe leave the room, try and calm yourself down, think about why you are thinking the way you do, maybe go outside, get some fresh air, and just try and calm yourself down. But do come back, because say if you are suffering from anxiety and you're going to all these lectures and you leave after a couple of minutes, what is that going to gain you in the long run? Are you improving as a person? Are you improving on your anxiety? Are you tackling the situation in the way that you should be? So removing yourself from the situation can work and it can't work, because at the end of the day, you want to figure out ways to be able to tackle these problems. You want to figure out a way that you can maybe improve it. And one thing that I try and do is take very, very small improvements every day. So for someone that suffers anxiety on a daily basis, I try and tackle little things every day. And if I can tackle one thing and feel pretty calm about it, feel pretty happy about it, feel pretty content, then I know that I can then next time I can improve on that situation. I can tackle it a little bit better than I have done previously. And it's these little improvements that you want to do to make sure that you are constantly progressing and constantly improving on tackling your anxiety or whatever it is that you're suffering with. So maybe removing yourself from the situation isn't the best piece of advice, so yeah, let's just forget about that one. But yeah, definitely try and work on it. Try and not put yourself through it, but try and suffer so that you can then come out the other side stronger. You can come out the other side feeling that you have just got through that 50-minute lecture and you have not left. You have sat there that whole time and you have stayed there. You've stayed listening to the lecture. Maybe you are very anxious in a lecture. I don't know why, but I do get really anxious in lectures. It's just the fact that I feel like I can't leave and I feel like I am kind of trapped in this room. But that is literally just my thought process. But maybe if you do get through this whole lecture, you've sat there for this whole hour and you've got through it, maybe next time you can work on maybe feeling a little bit more chilled out, and then the time after that you can maybe being more chilled out for 20 minutes of the lecture, and then after that you can try and be more chilled out for 30 minutes of the lecture. Obviously some days you will feel more anxious than others, but it's these little improvements that will help us understand the way we feel, understand our body, and essentially understand how we can tackle these problems. So yeah, don't listen to my piece of advice of remove yourself from the situation. The next point being, speak to people about your problems. You are not the only one. So this is something that I've dived into in my YouTube videos before. Jesus Christ, that scared me. Just the postman putting a piece of post through the letterbox. So this is something that I've dived into previously on my YouTube channel. And this is essentially, you are not the only one. There are mental health issues or mental health problems or mental health disorders, however you want to call them. They are very, very, very common, and this is what people don't understand. When you are feeling in a certain situation, when you are suffering from depression or anxiety, a lot of the time you feel the feeling of isolation. You feel like you are the only person in the world feeling this way. And I can tell you right now from my experience and my experience of talking to people, you are not the only one. And for me, I suffered for a long period of time because I didn't speak to anyone about my problems, and essentially nothing got better because I didn't want to speak to anyone about it. I felt like I was the only person suffering. I felt like it sounded stupid when I tried to, even when I was thinking it through to myself, I thought that I was being stupid. I thought I was being silly. I just thought that my thought process was ridiculous. But at the end of the day, everyone is in the same situation. I can promise you that if you are suffering from anxiety and you feel like you are the only person in the world suffering, I can promise you, I can look at you right now and tell you that you are not alone. So many people suffer from anxiety, whether it's quite severe, whether it's not very severe, but they suffer from a little bit. I can promise you, you will be surprised at how many people are suffering. And I didn't find that out myself personally until I actually started to speak to people and speak about my problems, and actually got people to get people to understand your situation, and then they can help you. Or maybe speak to someone and then you hear about their situation, and that makes you feel a little bit better because you know that they've been through it and you know that they've tackled it in a certain way. You get what I mean? So speaking to people about your problems, I am now pretty open about my anxiety problems. I speak to my parents quite a lot. If I'm ever feeling quite anxious, I will speak to my parents. I speak to my mates a lot about it, and generally I feel so much better. I feel so much happier in myself because I know that I'm not the only one, and I know that I have people there to speak to. So obviously the initial kind of telling people about your issues is probably the most difficult thing. But once you get to speak to them, you know that you can then go back to them for advice, and you know that you will feel better if you do speak to someone about it. So I promise you, you're not the only one. The next point, and probably the final piece of advice, talking about anxiety and mental health, is going to be, although you feel, this is specifically direct to anxiety, although you feel anxiety is consuming your life, don't let it prevent you from living your life. So this is something that has really kind of hit me hard. So I have suffered from anxiety for the past probably 2 or 3 years now, but it's kind of just gone on and off. I suffer daily from anxiety, but sometimes it's quite severe in certain areas of my life, which I'm sure you guys are suffering. You probably understand that. But for me, it did really, really start to consume my life. It started to dictate what I was going to do, dictate what I didn't want to do. Even though I really wanted to do something, I wouldn't do it because of my anxiety. And therefore, my massive piece of advice is don't let it prevent you from living your life, because it can take over very quickly. If you let it take over, it will take over your life, and you'll find it a lot harder to get out of that situation if you do let it consume your life. So 100% try and I know it's harder to do than it sounds, but try and not let it prevent you from living your life. If you want to do something, go and do it. If your anxiety or your depression or whatever is stopping you from doing that, if your anxiety is stopping you from going to see your mates, don't let it. Just go and do it. Just force yourself out, push yourself past that point, and you will feel, like I mentioned earlier on in the podcast, you will feel that these little improvements every day, these little improvements on each thing in your life, you will gradually get better and better and better over time. You will feel much better in each situations. Yes, maybe some days you will feel worse than other days. Some days you will feel absolutely fantastic, and you wake up the next day and you're already feeling anxious and you're already feeling like it's going to be a bad day and you're going to be suffering in this day. But try not to let it prevent you from living your life. At the end of the day, we only live once. I know that sounds unbelievably cheesy and cliche, but at the end of the day, it's true. We only live once. We've only got one life. Make the most of it. Don't let your mental health issues prevent you from living your life. Yes, it's going to stop you from doing a few things, but for me, I wanted to make sure that it was not going to prevent me from living my life. It wasn't going to prevent me from doing things in my life, and therefore, a lot of the time, because of my anxiety, I've done more things because I forced myself to do it. I forced myself through certain situations, knowing that coming out the other side, I will feel much better, much happier. I will feel like I have then tackled that certain issue. And yeah, that was the kind of like mental health portion of the video. I hope this actually helps people, because when I've previously spoke through it on my YouTube channel, I've had an unbelievable response, and this is kind of something that people have been asking me for. So if you do have any more questions, or if you are suffering or whatever, please just let me know. If you are listening to this on the audio, you can probably hit me up on Instagram. It's at Tom Rowe, so at Tom ROWW, so 2 W's. And then obviously if you're watching this on the YouTube channel, just drop a comment down below or just direct message me or whatever. And that is my home phone ringing, so we're just going to wait a second and let that pass over. Sipping my coffee. Also, what's your guys' opinion on the cup? So it says cute ass, shame about the hairy legs. I think it's actually my mum's mug. Right, so moving on into the next portion of the podcast. So now I'm going to be talking about kind of my thoughts on moving into third year. Obviously mentioning about the whole anxiety thing, I think I will kind of tackle that a little bit better next time I go in, because I've already kind of gone in and met the people, met the head of years. I think it was just like that initial stage of actually walking into university was quite difficult. But my thoughts on third year is, I'm absolutely mind blown at how fast everything is gone. I'm absolutely mind blown at the fact that I am now a third year university student. I remember making my first YouTube videos when I was a first year student, and I can't believe that I'm now in third year. And yeah, it's crazy how fast it's gone. My thoughts is that I'm pretty scared and pretty nervous as what the year is going to prevail. It's going to be an interesting year. Obviously, this is the degree year. For some courses, obviously, you will build up accreditation in second year, I believe, that which you will take through into third year. Sorry, my throat's hurting now. Yeah, so in second year, some courses take over some credits so that you can use them in third year. But for me, first and second year didn't actually mean anything. So therefore, third year is completely my degree year. Everything that I do in third year matters. I need to hit everything perfectly to obviously get my degree. And essentially the main goal was to get that first. I'm literally obsessed with getting the first. I'm not sure why. I've just literally the day I started university, I didn't get a first in first year. I grafted my absolute arse off to get one. I didn't get one. I grafted my arse off in second year. I got a first in my portfolio. but I didn't actually get one overall. I think I got like 68% overall, which was close to a first, but a couple of modules let me down. So third year, I'm going to be obsessed with getting this first. I'm going to be grafting. I'm going to be working as hard as possible. But essentially, I want to make this a year of, I know this sounds cliche, but I want to make it a year of balance. I want to be able to balance everything pretty well. In previous years, I have not balanced things well at all. I've worked very, very hard in my university. I've kind of neglected my social life quite a lot. I spent a lot of time in the gym. I spent a lot of time doing YouTube videos, and I haven't spent enough time with my friends, and that's something that I really do want to focus on in third year. I see my friends, go out a little bit more, enjoy myself a little bit more, and try not to be as hard on myself as I have done in previous years. Purely down to the fact that the past 2 years I've kind of burnt myself out with the amount of work that I've given myself, the amount of pressure I've put on myself. Because like I've mentioned, I am very, very hard on myself. If I'm going to do something, I'm going to give it my all. I'm going to try as hard as I possibly can. But at the end of the day, third year is my final year at university to get my degree. So I want to make the most of it. I want to see my mates. I want to spend time with my mates. I want to spend time with my university mates. But at the same time, I do want to still really focus on the university, because this is the degree year. I need to get a really good grade, and I really do need to get my degree. I want to focus on my YouTube videos. I want to focus on the podcast. I want to focus on my training, my nutrition. There's a lot of things to focus on, and that's why I want to make this year a year of balance, and I hope you guys can take advice from that. If you are in first year and maybe you're going out a little bit too much, maybe you need to do a little bit more uni work. Just try and find a balance, and over the weeks and months you will understand, you'll get a better understanding of how to balance your work, how to balance your social life, how to balance your hobbies, etc. We're now going to dive into a Q&A. So these are a few questions that you guys have asked me on my Instagram. First one being, what is your favourite film? So interesting one. This is going to be probably, well, just everyone's going to say this, but basically probably my favourite film as of right now is probably Avengers Endgame. I'm sorry, I've said it, everyone has said it, everyone loves it. Obviously it's like the highest grossing movie of all time now. It's overtaken Avatar. But Avengers Endgame is absolutely unbelievable. I'm a huge fan of Marvel. I've literally watched all of the Marvel films. I absolutely love all of them. Iron Man was probably one of my favourite films before kind of like the whole Avengers thing. But my favourite film at the moment is probably Endgame. I do have a lot of films I like. I watch loads and loads of films. In my living room, we have probably got about 500 films sat in front of the TV. So we are definitely a films kind of people. I am definitely a films kind of guy. I absolutely love watching my films. Next question being is how to succeed well in architecture year 2. So kind of make that a little bit broader. So to succeed at university maybe in second year is try and nail down your research. So do a lot of research, and try and build on for architect students, build on your computer skills, because first year is kind of like taster year. You're getting to know the people, you get to know the course, you get to understand maybe what you're good at, maybe you're not good at. Second year, you definitely start to develop on those skills. You definitely start to understand maybe what you are good at, maybe what you need to improve on, maybe what you're not so good at, and definitely utilize second year to do as much research as possible. Get yourself ready for third year, because obviously third year is the year that counts. So utilize second year as that kind of like middle year to get your research, to develop on your skills, and just build up your knowledge and your kind of like your database, ready for third year essentially. And my final question is going to be, what are your plans after third year? So I'm going to go into this completely in a different podcast, because I believe that this is a massive question. But essentially, I am currently unsure on what I want to do after third year. I have got a lot of things in mind which I cannot just make my mind up at the moment. But I think what I'm going to do is just get through third year, and then after third year decide what I want to do. I don't really want to make plans too early on, in case that my plans change, because a lot of the time my opinions and my plans change quite often. At the end of the day, you don't really want to plan out your future. You just want to play it by ear, and kind of just get through you just want to enjoy yourself and just not kind of stick yourself to one thing. For me, I'm hugely passionate about filming, doing YouTube videos, helping people out, doing these podcasts. At the end of the day, I may and I may not become an architect. I know that is a bold statement. I may and may not become an architect. Whether I'll go into architecture, whether I'll go into a different creative and design field, I do not know yet, but I'm just going to utilise this year to help me understand what I actually want to do and what will actually make me happy, because essentially that is probably the most important thing in life, is being happy. And yeah, that is going to be a wrap on today's podcast. Obviously, we went from a story time right in to a bit of a deep topic in mental health. But it's something that you guys have been asking for, so I hope you guys have found that useful. Like I always mention, if you've got any questions, just please let me know. Message me on Instagram. Drop a comment in down below if you're watching this on the visual. And yeah, once again, the student podcast will be live on my YouTube channel, which is Thomas Rowntree. Or if you want to listen to it on the audio, it's live on Spotify, iTunes, and SoundCloud. So some people have been struggling to actually find it. What you might find easier to find it is literally just type in my name, Thomas Rowntree, and the student podcast will tend to pop up. If you type in the student podcast, you might struggle finding it. But if you actually type in Thomas Rowntree, you will find it a little bit easier. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed the podcast, episode 2 of the student podcast. Episode number 3 is hopefully going to be including a guest, because I feel like people are going to get bored of just my voice, and I'm personally going to get a sore throat from speaking this much this quickly. So I'm going to try and get a guest on the next show, which will be really interesting and really fun, to get someone else's perspective on like a topic or something. So yeah, thank you as always for watching the video, guys, or listening to the podcast. Make sure you subscribe, hit that notification bell, like the video, and I will see you next time. Peace. Oh, that didn't work. Peace.